How delicate are you, Danny?
Not that delicate.
How much do you have to drink?
I don't know. I didn't think it was that much, but I had a martini.
How many drinks at dinner?
2, but 1 was a martini.
You only had 2 drinks through a whole 2-hour meal.
No, we weren't even there that long. I was arguing with Junset the whole time.
What were you arguing with Junset about?
I actually will not say that on recording.
Ooh.
Not for me, but for Junset.
Well, this is part of the show now. People are going to want to know,
Well,
what did Junset say?
You have to come to What Bitcoin Did Live.
That's right. I love the your inclusion on the show now more formally.
Especially the Patreon's the most fun one for that.
It's been a good thing.
Yeah,
bringing Danny in.
I think he's you've already said this before, right? Like your conscience.
Yeah, a little bit
sometimes.
But the one thing there's 2 things that piss me off about it.
Yeah.
All right. The first one is like, Danny always asks such good questions, and I'm like, he asked one a fucking show.
Yes,
like
it is easy. There.
It has to be a good question if you're asking what a show.
Yeah.
But also, it's the thing when we go to events now, of people are like, "Oh, where's Danny?" And I'm like, they're like, "Oh, where's Danny?" I'm like, "Oh, he's not here." And they're like, "Oh, well, fuck Danny." No, it's been really good. All the emails we get now are written to Peter and Danny, pretty much.
Love to see it.
Danny has a stalker on YouTube.
That's a problem.
Derek S.
Derek S.
Big shout out, Derek S.
Derek S. The man is definitely smoking something.
But all of your fans are stone sober.
No, mine are just psychopaths.
Yeah.
The anti-fans.
Yeah.
Actually, they're dying down.
Are they?
Yeah.
You know why? Because you just fucking moved on.
Yeah.
You don't give them power, and they just like they're gonna scream into the void.
Yeah, we were talking about it yesterday, weren't we? With Hodl, it's like, what did he say? A standing army destroys itself.
Yeah,
and they've kind of imploded, and I think just the whole world's moved on from like, yeah, let's be toxic.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that on the show. I think.
Well, the show's on. We're recording.
We're live.
We're
doing it.
We don't tell.
You did a stealth rip on me. All right.
Like you're in.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it also came a lot too for like your management on Twitter, being able to communicate people. You're less combative and like giving attention to every troll that says something mean to you, right? And that removes their power. And that was Danny. There you go.
With Danny, we used to do our little therapy sessions every morning. I'd go for a walk, call Danny as I walked around Bedford Park, saying they're so mean to me.
But
Danny
these people with 3 followers on Twitter are being mean to me.
Yeah.
Spokane Hodl was rude to me.
Yeah. Fuck Spokane Hodl. He's a dick. Have you met Serious.Hodl?
Serious? No.
You have.
Okay.
I've rebranded American Hodl to Serious.Hodl.
Serious.Hodl.
Have you not noticed his Twitter's got really serious now?
Yeah, I think his rebirth onto Twitter, he's just taking a different perspective of what he's there for.
We've got a serious New York soundtrack going on in the background.
Shut the fuck up, New York. Every time we come to New York, it's just noise.
Yeah, it's a
everywhere.
complete shit show. Yeah.
But I like his rebirth. I think he's so smart.
I think he also is a bit atoning for his sins because his irreverent, hilarious style, you had a bunch of left curvers copy them, not realizing that you have to have like tact and intelligence to be funny and rude. And people just, I can be rude and get social following. And then it turned into this like very negative feedback loop where you would, instead of having interesting ideas or, different perspectives, it was just who could be the biggest dick.
Yeah.
And then it became a way of a badge of honor of just being a dick. And then you don't really have much of a culture on being a dick.
Yeah. No, and I kind of, one of the things I've really appreciated with him is like we have a lot of like offline conversations where we hang out, and he's actually very practical and realistic about the world we live in, rather than people are just like in the government and like all the kind of standard bullshit you hear. This expectation that Bitcoin fixes the entire world all the time, and if you don't agree with that, then you're a cuck. Like he's actually very practical in the background. He's very realistic about the world, and I appreciate him for that.
He's a good man.
He's Serious.Hodl.
He is. Yeah, he was. He's a very interesting guy. I got to hang out with him a lot more on Clubhouse, and when the idea came up around me starting a company, he was first money in. He's like, Rob, let's just do it. Like, go. I believe in you. Go shoot for it. And he's been an amazing person to get advice from and perspectives from. He's the man is more than just the Twitter meme. And I think maybe Serious Hodl's a little bit of showing that other side of him.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think you should wear a suit and a tie now.
Yeah.
Anyway, how you been, man?
I'm doing well.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's nice to have your wife here.
Yeah.
Hi, Abby.
Hello, Abby. Yeah. She now knows all my internet friends aren't just made up in my head.
We're going to talk to Abby later. We're going to embarrass her. Good to see you, man. Always good to see you. So we're going to discuss Ordinals. So the setup is that I kind of seen the debate happening, and you know, when anything like this kicks off, you kind of everyone takes a position, right?
Sure.
And I couldn't take a position on this because I was like watching these arguments and thinking, I don't give a fuck. Because I don't give a fuck if people want to post JPEGs to Bitcoin, but I also don't give a fuck if people's like, some people are like, this is bad for Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's about money. This is bloated in the blockchain, whatever their reason is. I was also like, well, go and figure that out. Go and figure it out. I took little interest in it, but my interest is now growing because a lot of people I like and respect are saying, no, this is cool. And a couple of things that stand out to me that I really like about it is it's making Bitcoin a bit more fun.
Yep.
I used to explain Bitcoin, being a Bitcoiner in crypto is like going to Vegas and then going to have a meeting in a glass room where you're having a very boring PowerPoint presentation and you're seeing everyone outside the glass room running around having fun.
Yeah.
That was what it like to be a Bitcoiner. And bringing a bit of fun is kind of cool. So that's kind of piqued my interest.
Sure.
I think that's kind of interesting. But I also am very sympathetic to the side that like we're trying to create the best money in the world. Does this get in the way of creating good money? Are there negative externalities that affect this being good money? So I'm kind of like, the only thing I don't like is the kind of, I've seen some almost religious condemnations of this, which I think it's just like, fuck off. No interest in that. So, but I don't know much about this. I've not spent much time looking at this. Let's do this, like explain it like I'm a fetus. Let's go straight in at the...
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Ordinal project was started by Casey Rotemore, who is a longtime Bitcoin developer. He is the leader for the San Francisco Bit Devs meetup. He took over after Alex Schleichman left from River. And he's been, for a very long time, involved in Bitcoin on the technical code level, right? And he also took interest in generative art. He started playing around and seeing that there were informed people that were buying and selling NFTs and creating art on Ethereum. And he wanted to understand, I think at a high level, like how this can be done with Bitcoin. The Ordinal project gives every single Satoshi since the beginning of the Genesis block all the way to the end a unique number.
That already existed, or something the Ordinal project has made that happen.
The Ordinal project brought it into some sort of consensus layer where you and I can come to agreement as to what each number was.
It's like a serial number on a banknote.
Very similar to that, yeah. And the idea is that this could have existed. This as an idea could have existed since the start of Bitcoin. There's nothing. All of the code that Casey's done, all of the Ordinal project stuff is entirely independent of Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin doesn't recognize any of this stuff. Bitcoin recognizes a transaction. Is it valid or is it not valid?
So where does the serial number, the Ordinal serial number, exist?
Yeah, so the Ordinal software, ORD, is what it's applying this layer. And to run this software, you have to run an entire full node and index every transaction that's ever happened.
So is this additional code or something you download onto your node?
On top of Bitcoin. It's like a layer that sits on top of Bitcoin.
Okay. And so some questions on that early on.
Sure.
If you are giving a serial number code to every single Satoshi, what does that do for things like Wasabi?
Well, it really doesn't matter in the sense that the serial numbers that are kind of following on top of this stuff have a very simple way of doing accounting. And if I were to use Wasabi or Samurai or Join Market, some sort of coin join, I may be trading my serial numbers, but I'm not holding the same serial number across the coin join. I'm not I'm basically like I give you $100 bill with the serial number 5, and you give me a $100 bill with the serial number 7.
Is there anything in there that would make someone like Chain Analysis life easier?
No, because only people who care about the Ordinal software are even looking at this.
All right,
stuff,
okay.
Right. So like if you never run the Ordinal software and you have one Bitcoin, you just have one Bitcoin. There's no It's not like the serial number's tracking you across time.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, but this is, to give a fair charitable side of the debate, this is one of the concerns, though, is that if enough people start using ordinals, a lot of people start building on top of this protocol, that there would be some case to be made that you are actually, those serial numbers matter. But the reality is that I think an overwhelming majority of Bitcoin users and the actual coins themselves pay no respect or care to any of this.
But if one person is running it, then every Satoshi does have this kind of serial number. And at any point, if somebody found a way of, or thought that information was useful for tracking something, they could download the Ordinal software and
follow it along.
And follow it along.
Yeah, right. So if someone was using the Ordinal software and they were trading some of these JPEGs that are floating around, you could use the Ordinal software to follow like the JPEG across the blockchain.
But if the Ordinal is applying this kind of serial number to every Satoshi, is it doing it from the point it sees everyone? Or is there already a unique identifier that is attaching it to it? Like, how does that? So
it actually starts all the way at the Genesis block. The first Satoshi ever mined in the Genesis block is Ordinal number 0. And there's 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. So the first block went from Satoshi number 0 to Satoshi number 5 billion, 50 Bitcoin. And then the next block went from 50 billion in 1 to 100 billion. And you do this across the entire blockchain and every single transaction as it comes in. Sorry to be dumb, but how does it attach it to that Satoshi? How does it know that's... Oh, no, I think I know. I think I understand. Because the software has identified them at that point and then is then following them. Yeah, so exactly. The software is following it across time. But hold on. Say Genesis block, you sent me half a Bitcoin from, say you mine the Genesis. Oh, you can't send Bitcoin from the Genesis block, can you? You can't. It's actually a specific... it's a specific part of the code that you can't actually use the Genesis block coins that are in there. Satoshi locked them specifically. So block 1, you want to send me half a Bitcoin. And so that's, 25 billion Satoshi. Sure, 25 Bitcoin, 25 billion Satoshis. Yeah, so sorry, you want to send me half the block, so it's 25 billion. How does it know which Satoshis are which? Well, I'm so happy you asked. I can do an example here of what it looks like right now with how it would work in a Bitcoin transaction. So I'm going to make this very simple. And I'm going to say we have a 6 Satoshi transaction. And I have 6 cards. So here are my Satoshis on my side of the transaction. I own 6 Satoshis, right? The way it works in normal Bitcoin today is I want to send you, let's say I want to send you 3. I send 3 to you, 1, 2, 3, right? I give 2 to myself back in change, right? That's how Bitcoin works, is you have to spend an entire transaction when you use it. So if this is the input side, my 6 Satoshis, I'm giving Peter 3 right here. I'm giving 2 back to myself as change. And this one is a miner fee. So the miner takes this one and it pays for the transaction. Okay. That's how a normal Bitcoin transaction works today. If I may, I was actually at Bitcoin Park last week with Casey, and we were talking about Ordinals, doing some code that we can talk about while we're here. But he also gave a gift for me to give to you. Oh, wow. Okay. So he ran a special ritual. He rubbed it against his node. He said some magical words. And these are magical oracles, like spectacle oracles. So you need to put these on. And I'm going to put on my own pair too. And we're going to go into the Ordiverse. All right? How do I look?
You look great.
Do I look cool? Udi would be proud of us right now. That's right. So now we're going into the Ordiverse. Here's what it actually looks like when you're running the Ordinal software. Each single Satoshi now has a unique face value. And we're using playing cards here for those at home on an audio. The first time I went through this, I had all the cards face down because they're fully fungible. The protocol knows no knowledge of anything. But now, if I want to send you a transaction with Ordinals, you can actually see each of these cards has a different value. I have a joker, a queen, a 10, an 8, a 5, and a 4. And let's say I have my 6 Satoshis here, and I'm now going to send you 1,
2, 3. I'm going to keep these 2 for change, and this one goes off as a miner's fee.
Okay.
So this is how the Ordinal software looks. It goes throughout the entire blockchain's history, and when you run the Ordinal software, you actually get to put on these magical sunglasses, and you're able to actually see the individual numbers. But to everyone else who's not using the Ordinal software, this is all invisible. It just looks like face down cards.
Okay, and does it work because when you do that send, it sequentially knows those? And
Yes.
say with these.
Yeah, these are now yours. Yeah, those 3 are now yours.
So these 3 are mine. If I'm going to send, say, 1 Satoshi to Danny,
Yep.
that's always the first one.
Yes. So this is called first in, first out, FIFO.
Right.
And
okay. And that's how it can
Keep track.
Right. That makes sense. I understand now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first in, first out. So this is just straight ordinals. We haven't talked about JPEGs. We haven't talked about, any of the crazy
butts.
data stuff. No dick butts yet. We're going to be getting there soon. But this is actually where, if you'd like, I can talk about what that actually is.
Okay.
So,
Do I need to keep these on?
well, if you want to see the orderverse,
Okay.
it's okay. We can go back to the normal world if you want.
No, that's fine.
Okay. So when you have all of these transactions, you're able to do things like embed data. So everything we've talked to up to this point is an ordinal. Just the number ordered. We haven't done anything
Can I go
yet.
back a step?
Please do.
When I've sent, so say I've sent you half a Bitcoin, does it really just know which is the first one and the last one, and it's making an assumption on the ones in between?
No, it actually, because as you go further and further throughout the history of the blockchain, and you have people sending 1 or like half of 1 or quarter 1, they start breaking up into chunks.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, before it breaks, does it only know the first and the last? Is it saying in there I've got 1 to 50 million or something?
Every single transaction has its own mix. So I could send you a Bitcoin transaction right now, and some of them, and before we even talk about the inscriptions, this is really interesting. You can actually start seeing, oh, I just sent you 1 Bitcoin. Maybe like 10 million sats, like 10% of that are coins that are from this year. Came from a miner early this year. They're freshly minted coins. Some of them, though, in the middle of that stack could be from 2009. Right? You can actually have, you may even have a rare ordinal. So there's actually...
We're going to come to that.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So what's really interesting is when you start ordering things, you start getting some interesting things. Like maybe all of the sats, a regular one is common because they're very widely available. An uncommon Satoshi, though, may be one that is the first Satoshi found in a block.
Hold on, I want to go back one step.
Sure.
Sorry.
Please.
If I send 1 sat, we know that 1 sat, what its number is.
Yep.
And the ordinal knows which one.
Yep.
But when I send half a Bitcoin and there's 50 million sats in there, does the software itself create those 50 million sats and therefore number them?
It creates the numbering, but the numbers are not
I don't know
like that.
How does it? But because when the Bitcoin
yes.
transaction sends, the Bitcoin software doesn't recognize each sat individually.
Yep.
It does?
No. Well, it does in the sense that it makes sure that your outputs look like your inputs. Make sure you're not printing extra money.
But it doesn't identify each sat separately. So surely the ordinal software only knows that it only can identify the first and the last one.
No, it's actually not true. So the way the Ordinal software works, when you download it and you run it, it starts at the first Genesis block all the way to present, and it's numbering every single one as it comes into existence from the miners.
Yes, in the software, right?
In the software.
Yeah, in the software. So it's creating them there.
Yep.
But but really, what it's really doing is, to me, it has to be a hack. When it's doing, it's like I know that's 50 Bitcoin, and I know the first sat and the last sat, but I don't know the in between ones. I create them my end, and I know them at the point they get split up.
So if it's fresh from a miner, they are all the same sequential number. But over time, it's kind of like breaking change. If I give you $100 bill and you give me back 5 20s, and then I go and give one of those 20s to like the gas station for something.
Yeah.
I've now broken the order of those. So that person maybe have, if you give me 5 $20 bills and it's bill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I give bill number 2 out of my pocket to someone, and then that person spends that number 2 and it goes off somewhere. I now have one, it breaks up like that. So it's not always I have 1 Bitcoin. It must be from 0 to 100 million.
No, I get that. But what I'm
Okay.
saying is at the point where the ordinal software goes, right, here is 1 Bitcoin, here's 100 million sats.
Yep.
It can definitely know individual sats,
Yes.
like identify
Yes.
them on an individual basis. But what it has to do is says, I know there's 100 million sats here.
Yeah, and then
I'm going to number them, but it can only actually truly identify an individual sat at the point it's been broken up.
the serial number is assigned when it gets mined in a block.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when it initially is given its serial number, if you want to call it that, for like the US, like the dollar example.
Yeah.
That's when it gets made. And then it just follows it across time. That's what it's doing going forward. So
Do you understand what I'm saying here, Danny?
I'm
I
a
don't.
little confused.
I'm a little confused as well, to be honest.
yeah, I
what
don't
I'm-
know what you're getting at.
What I'm saying is if I send you one sat,
Yep.
the ordinal knows that sat and what that individual number is. If I send you 10 sats, how does it know the in-between ones? Because Bitcoin software doesn't separate
But
the
the
sats.
ordinal software does.
Yes, but it has to be an assumption.
It makes an assumption
Yeah.
with this first in, first out accounting
Yes.
method. Yep. Yeah.
Now you get it.
I think we're on the same page now. Yeah.
Do you
we got
understand
there.
what I'm saying,
I think we got there. Yeah.
Danny?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I'm asking a good question here. But maybe it's because
Do you need to take off the magic oracles? Do you want to take them off? Leave the orderverse for a bit?
No, so what I'm trying to understand is what is Bitcoin software, what is other software, and how relevant it is to Bitcoin.
Sure.
Because if this software is saying these are individual sats and it's given them like identifiers, but if the Bitcoin software doesn't actually identify individual sats, then this is just a different piece of software making its own assumptions.
It is a different piece of software making its own assumptions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a shared hallucination.
Yes.
We're all agreeing on this together.
Okay.
Yep.
We're good.
Exactly. All right.
45 minutes in.
So very quickly, just on the ordinal side, before talking about the JPEGs, you can have, this is the first Satoshi that was mined in a given block. That's maybe uncommon, right? And then you can have, I have the first Satoshi that came after a difficulty adjustment. That only happens once every 2 weeks. That's more rare. And then you can have the first Satoshi after a new halving.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's like people who collect banknotes with serial numbers on them.
Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast, Bitcoin.review with Reindahl and Rodolfo, MBK, and Casey. And they were talking about people are natural. A lot of people in Bitcoin are just natural collectors. So maybe you want to collect some Satoshis from every single exchange hack, right? Quadriga, Bitfinex, you can start, since you know where in the hack happened, you know all of the individual serial numbers that were involved in that hack. Maybe you want to collect that, right? Maybe I want to collect a couple Satoshis for my wedding day, right? You can find little fun things that you can use to commemorate occasions, and you're applying this new shared hallucination to be able to collect, different Satoshis that have value to you uniquely.
Yeah, so I bought a print by a Russian artist. It's a limited 50. I knew the distributor, so I asked for number 1 because number 1 is always the most popular. It's always worth more.
Right. Yeah.
Or it's like first edition prints of books.
But all the prints are the same, but
Exactly
this one's the
the
first
same.
serial number.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it literally says 1 of 50 on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, it's arbitrary because the art is identical. It's the serial number on top of it that people assign more value to.
Okay, so you could argue there's a net negative if people start hoarding Satoshis based on numbers because we want this to be money.
I mean, I think I would reject the term hoarding. What are you when you're hodling Bitcoin?
You are holding to spend in the future to make use of it. But when you're hoarding, you may never make use of it.
Well, I think there's a couple of things I have thoughts on that. So one, I think holding it and then maybe eventually passing it down to your child or selling it off in a collection later, it may not be in the literal sense of I'm going to use this to go buy, groceries, but it's still legitimate use case in that, it's my property, I'm going to hold on to it. And by restricting more people hold on to it, this is the whole idea around you want to hold it and then there's less available supply and the price goes up. So this is part of, hoarding as a term. That's part of the whole number go up thesis.
Yeah, but I'm not a huge number go up thesis guy anymore anyway, because I'm my view on Bitcoin, when I talk about Bitcoin, I did a presentation at the football club the other day and I was like, Bitcoin is the best money that's ever existed.
Yeah.
So therefore there's a trade-off here between, does this make this the best form of money, or are there some selfish incentives that could slightly make it less great money? And I think giving people a reason to hold certain Satoshis and hoard them, and I will use the term hoard them, I think is a selfish decision. It's a personal decision, selfish.
Yeah.
that works against Bitcoin being the best form of money?
Well, I think the desire to hold Bitcoin helps with it being the best form of money, because this is like Gresham's law. If I have bad money, I want to get rid of the bad money and hold on to the good money.
Yeah, but the reason to hold it is different now. It's because some superficial human reason, but it's not about best money.
But when people collect special coins, does that ruin the dollar as a form of money?
Dollar's already ruined. It's shit money already.
But that's not the point. Like I'm saying, like,
But it is the point, because what I'm saying is we're trying to create the best form of money.
So this is actually, I think, an even further zoom out. Bitcoin exists.
Mm-hmm.
Any sort of moralistic lens of perspectives of like what it should be doing is a conversation, but Bitcoin works as this anarchic system where there's no one in control and everyone gets to use it however they want. And if people can't do that, the project fails.
No, I completely agree. But what I'm just saying is, if like my empathetic side is,
sure,
are we trying to create the best form of money that ever existed? Do we make it less good by giving people to hoard it, which has nothing to do with money and purely to do with superficial human reasons?
I don't think that's a bad thing, in that like people are going to use it for whatever they want to need to. And I think this is a very important point, that I think the stuff that's going on with Ordinals right now, whether it's a flash in the pan and no one's caring. Well, one, I have some thoughts on that. Bitcoin, like Ordinals in general, I think it's almost a change of the guard from a narrative element in Bitcoin. Bitcoin will still be sound money. It will be still something we all talk about as a good, strong form of money. But Ordinals is changing the narrative of what it is to be using Bitcoin and what is Bitcoin for. And I think this is something that we're seeing kind of a sea change of narrative right now on how people use and think about Bitcoin. We're
seeing a debate.
I think the
don't think it's a narrative.
settled.
I don't think it's settled yet. As somebody, because like I can step outside of this as somebody who doesn't give a fuck either way.
Yep.
And I do not think this is a settled debate. And the reason I don't think it's settled is I put a question out yesterday on Twitter about it, and the same one out on Nostra, and I got very different replies on Nostra.
Yep.
On Twitter, it was very much like, yeah, this is great, with some negatives. On Nostra, it's very much, this is fucking stupid, with a few positives. Well, so it's settled. It's far from settled.
I think this is what I mean, though, by a narrative change, because the people that are there are, classes of 2017, 2018, maybe even earlier too. I mean, there's a lot of older, like old school Bitcoiners on there, but they have this sound money primacy thesis about what Bitcoin is supposed to be. And the reality is that the people that are using it now for inscriptions and JPEGs and all the silly collecting stuff, they're part of Bitcoin. They're using Bitcoin. They're following the rules of Bitcoin, and they're here to stay.
But Bitcoin evolves and changes.
Yeah, exists. Yeah, I think this is part of Bitcoin's evolution, and we have to kind of, from my perspective, I actually personally would love to have smaller blocks. I'm never going to have smaller blocks, but that's just my wish list. We now live in a world, though, where these are valid Bitcoin transactions. We can't censor or remove them. They're following the rules of Bitcoin, so we have to live to exist with them. So rather than seething and coping, just accepting that this is the current state of play. We had a block size increase during SegWit in 2017, and then BIP 342, which was part of Taproot, removed the script size limit, which is why you're getting these very large transactions now that are being embedded. And you can't undo those changes easily. So we have to accept this is the new state of play. And this is what I mean by a narrative shift, because people, like you said, like people are having fun with Bitcoin, playing around with it, and it has nothing to do with money. People are touching and playing with Bitcoin now with no care for the digital gold thesis. They have no care for, sound money as a narrative. They're having fun doing art collections and JPEGs and being irreverent and making silly memes on the blockchain. And it's just like, they're here now. You can't kick them out. And I think this is part of that narrative sea change.
Well, 2 points on that. Firstly, there are people who are definitely pro NFTs on Bitcoin who are definitely mocking the Ethereum people for NFTs a year ago. Yep. People have flipped their perspective on this for a selfish reason because they think it's good for them, right? And then they mock people. It's a hypocritical position to take, fine, but it's a hypocritical position to take. I value their opinion less because I think their actions are more based around personal number go up,
sure,
than wider adoption and benefit of sound money for a wider community. Like yesterday, we were making our show about, we're doing a new 3-part beginner's guide, really simple one.
Yep.
And one of the questions we said is we talked about why Bitcoin's good money, why benefits people.
Yep.
Well, let's look how it's maybe different for people in the developing world because they have a different use case.
Sure.
And so, I'm beyond the number go up now. I don't care anymore. I care about the widespread adoption of Bitcoin that benefits people's lives. So the point I'm trying to get to is I'm not trying to be combative. I've not taken a position. I would argue whatever side you take, I would argue the other side. So if we're trying to create sound money, if we're trying to create the best form of money, I have to at least kind of push back against this. And when you say it's here and we have to accept it, is that 100% true? This cannot be undone. There's no technical way to undo this.
I mean, you can fork off.
No. Can it be done without a hard fork?
It can be done with a hard fork. What you would need to do, though,
Without
is
a hard fork.
without one. You would have to have all of the miners agree not to touch this stuff anymore. But the miners are now getting transaction fees.
Well, so you don't always just have to have the miners. No 2x proved that.
Sure.
Okay. And what I'm saying is, therefore, the point I'm trying to get to is I'm not trying to argue against you and have the debate right now. What I'm trying to say, the debate isn't settled. The debate might go on. If it got to the point, it may get to a point where there is a debate about, actually, is this good for Bitcoin or not? And if it isn't, is there a way of getting rid of it? And will people get rid of it?
Yeah. So the way you could get rid of it is if you had a bunch of users come together, do a user-activated soft fork and say, we are going to censor and not acknowledge the existence of any ordinal inscriptions.
Which we can fully...
It could be done. Which
is exactly what happened during the block size wars and largely contributed to the failure of the hard fork.
Yeah. But again, we should walk through this for a moment then. Okay. You have a coalition of people who want to ban this. One, I was talking to Pete Rizzo about this. He calls this the degens paradox.
I think we have to be careful with language here, because you're saying ban this, and that it's instantly like a pejorative, when actually it's I think some people out there want the best, soundest form of money,
sure,
and they think this is a net negative.
I understand and sympathize with the idea of that.
Yeah.
But again, okay, so how are you going to do it? If you're not going to have, if you want to have the users put forward a change, your option is to fork this behavior out of the network, which means I will not recognize any ordinal transaction at all. That then means, though, you would have the moment a block was mined that had ordinals, and you pick a block height saying at block height 1 million, we're going to no longer do ordinals. If that block has ordinals in it, you have a fork in the network now. You have people who decided to break off from the network and not recognize ordinals exist, and you have people who decided that they wanted to stay. And now you have a fork, just like you had with Bcash, right? So now you have to understand, like, how committed are you to this? And this is me coming from a sense of acceptance of I'm not trying to change consensus. And this is the ordinal stuff is not breaking technical consensus of the code.
I know, but I think you're more likely to see a social campaign first.
Sure, but there's not enough demand there. Because the miners, like, you need more than just the users. You need the miners to cooperate with that. So then you need miners to act against their own interest and have lower transaction fees to make this work. Maybe you offset it by making a smaller block size. If there's a smaller block size, there's less space to get into the next block, so transaction fees go up. So maybe that offsets it.
But that would have to be a hard fork.
Would that have to be a hard fork?
It has to be a hard fork.
No, you can have users all opted and say...
I'm almost certain, because I discussed this with Luke Dasher, that 300, he wants 300K block sizes, and I'm pretty sure the only way you can do that is a hard fork.
Well, you could have all miners agree just not to publish blocks that are over 300 kilobytes. And then that's just like it's a user behavior. It's not actually changing any lines of code. If all of the miners agreed, hey, we're not going to make a block anymore that's over 300 kilobytes, you could do it, but you need all the miners to agree to it.
Yeah, I don't see that.
If you want to make it a rule, it has to be a fork.
Yeah, I just don't see that one happening.
I agree. And I'm coming from a place of acceptance that Casey put a lot of thought into the design of this to do it within the design space and rules of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And because of that, if you don't like it, you are the one that's changing the rules of Bitcoin. And this is where you're like when there's an application of like moral or social narratives on top of the technical code of Bitcoin, that's when you're like, well, is this good for the sound money thesis? And it's like, well, the sound money thesis is not literally in the code, as in this must be the primacy use case of Bitcoin. We apply narratives and say, well, there's certain characteristics of Bitcoin, the limited supply, the controlled issuance, the difficulty adjustment that benefited as sound money, but there's nothing in the code that says it must be sound money.
No, but like for some people, I imagine this is a really important point, like on a maybe ethical level for them.
Sure.
When Rosa Parks sat at the back of the bus or the front of the bus, I can't remember what were the rules. Front of the bus.
Front of the bus.
Yeah, she broke the laws of society because. And when I bought cannabis oil for my mum, I broke the laws because I thought it was the right thing to do.
Right.
Some people may see this as like we're trying to bring sound money, and this might be a net negative.
But we're talking about the actual changing of the rules of the code. Like the Bitcoin blockchain works because we all agree on consensus.
Of course.
If you change consensus, that's a very scary place to be, and you will cause a fork if there's a disagreement. The only reason why we don't have forks in Bitcoin is like
but that's
splits.
what I'm saying. Social campaign first.
Sure.
I'm saying all I'm saying is I don't think this is settled.
I think there's too much support from all of the miners, many of the users. There is a small subset of users right now who believe in the general world of Bitcoin that would want to actually have a fork, because a fork is putting your skin in the game, money on the table, saying, I am going to, after the fork happens, I'm going to sell the other fork's coins, right? So if you have Ordinal free, Ordinal disrespecter, and Ordinal respecter, you have the base chain right now.
Oh, I think the Ordinal one wins right now. But I think it's purely selfish.
Well, Bitcoin works because everyone has their own selfish motivations. No one's altruistically acting within Bitcoin, the code itself. We have agents like you who believe in things like, bringing better money to the developing world. But that's you individually. That's not the Bitcoin code doing that, right? And I think that's, this is just kind of the messy thing. It's rough consensus. It's messy. It's sloppy. And it's a very serious thing if you're going to change it. And I think Bitcoin works because everyone is selfishly motivated. If it required an altruistic lens, it would require external maintenance of to keep it going, and the project would fail. Bitcoin works because everyone is selfish.
Hold on. I think we've got to where we are over 13, 14 years of Bitcoin because of altruism.
I mean, in what way?
I mean, a lot of people have had to make sacrifices to work and build Bitcoin, develop Bitcoin. I mean, anyone who took a job or worked on Bitcoin Core instead of taking a high paid salary at Google, that was an altruistic action to create better sound money.
I think people just find it as an interesting software project. They may not necessarily, they're not, I don't think people in 2010 were like, I'm going to work on this to be able to get sound money to the world. They found it as an incredibly unique software project to work on. There may be some people who do that as well.
There is definitely altruistic work with the Bitcoin. When you make a donation to a developer, that's altruistic work.
Yeah. I donated to Luke Dasher, and those coins did not move until the day of his hack. They literally sat there in a UTXO, and then I heard he got hacked, and I went and looked at my old addresses.
I just think you're wrong saying there's no altruism in Bitcoin.
The code itself, the protocol moves forward without requiring altruism. The protocol exists because of greed. Miners are not mining out of the goodness of their heart. They may have business decisions and reasons where they may mine unprofitably for a certain period of time because they believe in a longer thesis of Bitcoin. But no one's that's not the miners propagate each new block out of their own selfish interest because they're able to make a profit. I hold on to Bitcoin because I have a selfish belief that it's going to be worth more in the future and it's going to be able to help me provide for my family. We all and this is where Bitcoin is an anarchic system. We each have our own senses and motivations, but it's all out of our own perception of what we want. There's no sort of ethical committee of Bitcoin saying, we haven't done enough, allocation of resources over here. We need to deploy stuff over here, right? There is no governing body that's deciding the moral ethical code of how Bitcoin should work.
Yeah, I'm just personally much less in that camp of being, my actions within Bitcoin being selfishly based. I'm much more now focused on how we get this out to people who really need it. And my only concern on Ordinals is that are they a net positive or a net negative for having good sound money for the world? I don't know the answer to that now.
Well, I think if you also look at it, I think there's projects like Fedimints and Lightning that are able to provide scaling layers and access to Bitcoin in different ways that don't have to interact on the base chain. Bitcoin block space is a limited, scarce resource. It's open, anyone can use it, but it's limited. It's something in the neighborhood. If you wanted to get every single person in the world on Lightning, it'd be 7 years to do that. And that's only if you did channel opens, right? No, I'm not sending you money. We're not doing any sort of Bitcoin transaction. So Bitcoin necessarily was always going to come to a place at some point where the block space was going to be full and layer 1 transactions were going to become expensive. It was the only way Bitcoin as a project was going to survive as the mining subsidy gets halved and halved and halved. You need to have, this is what people used to joke about the mining death spiral, that 15 years from now, you're going to earn half a Bitcoin in a block. And all of a sudden now it's not enough money to actually subsidize the miners. You needed a robust fee market for Bitcoin to work in the long run. It was necessary. And I think
I
what happened
know.
with Ordinals is it pushed that up way faster than anyone expected. The mempool may never clear again. So the mempool being this kind of where all the unconfirmed transactions sit. You used to, 3 weeks ago, you'd be able to get in next block, pay 1 sat for review byte, which meant you paid maybe 5 cents for $1 million transaction. Those days are over. And there's an interesting
very high time preference there.
Right. But if you wanted to clear faster, you would be able to do now like things like 10 or 5 sats per review byte, depending on what time of day it is. What's really interesting is that the financial transactions on Bitcoin are much more economically dense than the ordinal stuff. In that, if I want to send you $1 million, it's a very small bit of data. If I want to put a 400 kilobyte JPEG, that's a lot more data, and I have to pay for that fees, and I have to compete with me sending you $1 million for 25 cents. They have to compete with that and pay full freight on the transaction size. There is the SegWit discount we can talk about, but we haven't even talked about inscriptions yet.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, just this stuff's really important. So we're very early in people using the Bitcoin blockchain for JPEGs.
Yep.
Probably the volume's quite low.
There's been 100,000 of them made in the past 3 weeks.
What if there were millions? What actually happens at that point?
We'll give it a couple months, but what happens at that point?
But can we get to the point where some people, can't even afford to open a Lightning channel?
I mean, what do you mean by they can't?
Well, it's become so expensive. So say you're some like dude in Africa who's got like $50 of Bitcoin, and transaction fees are $50.
Well, yeah, but this is where Fedimints come in, and also using custodial Lightning services, or using kind of like the Galoy money where you have the Bitcoin Beach, where they have the one node that runs it for the whole town, right? You're going to have scaling solutions like that because each individual person was never going to be able to use Bitcoin's blockchain on the base layer.
So I'm not a fan of Fedimint, by the way.
Okay.
I'm really struggling with Fedimint because it sounds like to me we're undoing all the good things we've said about not your keys, not your Bitcoin. I've just really struggled with it.
Well, this is an interesting conversation about scaling. Genuinely, this is actually kind of an artifact of the block size work, because the big blocker said, I want to be able to have every single transaction freely available so anyone in the world can pay very low transaction fees. And the other side of that said, we can't scale to a global money and store every single time you're buying a cup of coffee for 8 billion people around the world. So this was part of the necessary trade-offs of the fork wars. You were not going to be able to have everyone interact with cheap base chain Bitcoin. And this is what I mean about Ordinals is permanently changing how we view and think about Bitcoin. And this is a sea change narrative from the sound money narrative to whatever this new era is, because the blocks are now full. Block space is now being aggressively bid by people using it for non-monetary use cases. It's going to take years for us to fully wrap our mind around what does that look like from a Bitcoin security use case and narrative, and how we sell it to others. It was just necessarily always going to happen. I think a lot of people thought it may have been 5 to 10 years from now, and it's just happening today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's keep going.
We can keep going. Yeah. So the next step.
By the way, I might even be pro Ordinals.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrestle with it.
I'm just at a place of acceptance that this is all Bitcoin technical consensus, and I am not going to fork off the network. So I have to live in a world where these exist. That's where I'm coming down on it. There's you can't put this back in the box. I'm not going to run an or disrespecter node because it's futile, because all you need is the miners to continue including these, and somewhere around 15 to 20% of nodes not running that, and it's going to work anyway. Right? People may want to individually delete some data off their own nodes because they don't want to hold the JPEGs. The problem then is you're not validating the whole transaction history, because you need to have all of that data sitting there to make sure it's a valid transaction. Is
there a scenario here where we're potentially bloating the blockchain within the rules, but to the point where the hardware requirements to run in a node become a little bit more challenging? Well,
we're going to probably start requiring like a 2 terabyte hard drive instead of a 1 terabyte hard drive. Do
we know how quickly that might happen? What is that, about 550 megabytes a day?
I mean, you've lost me.
4 times 144 blocks in a day is half a gig a day.
Yeah.
Times a year, that's 210 gigs a year.
So if
every block was max full, that's 210 gigs per year.
Okay, so every 4 years, another terabyte.
Yeah.
But that's pretty significant when we're at 500 gig after 14 years or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's around 650 or 700 right now. But yeah, it's
so in another 8 years, people might need a multiple terabyte drive.
Yes, but this is also where I think the actual real problem here was the block size increase with SegWit. which we don't have to get too technical into the
But
details.
gave
This
us
was
too
seen
much
as a compromise.
Gave us too much.
Again, and now we have 4 megabyte blocks if you use a lot of witness data, which is exactly what Ordinals do. So to try and bring this to the actual JPEG stuff.
Hold on, we shouldn't just skip over the fact that every 4 years, people are going to need another terabyte for their hard drive. And, and you may be in a scenario where people have got 1 terabyte at the moment. We're at 500 gig and they knew they were pretty good for a few more years. And now in 2 years, they're not. And then this might lead to a lower node count.
Yeah. So, well, one, people are saying in Ordinal's community that not your node, not your JPEG. So if you actually want to hold on to your JPEG, you need to have a node, right? Because that's where the data is being stored. Additionally, I think the happy path, if you were trying to find some sort of brokering between the people who don't like Ordinals and the people that are enjoying Ordinals, is a block size decrease. I think that's the way you would be able to bridge camps and being able to. The Ordinals will continue to exist, but we're not going to bloat the blockchain as much with extra data. It gets tricky then, because then if you do that, large Ordinals, if people are trading these for value, they get kind of grandfathered in before the rules change, so they become worth more. So this is like the degen paradox P. Rizzo was talking about. Like if you try to change this behavior, you're going to increase the speculative people that are trying to mint these before they get removed.
Yeah, and then my question would be, well, what now JPEGs? What next? Contracts, like all kinds of things could end up.
This is fascinating. Yeah,
which is interesting because it's like permanently etched in the Bitcoin blockchain. These things that people want to put in there. One of the could we find ourselves in? So let's go down a different scenario. Okay, it's starting to get bloated, starting to get really, really full. Things aren't getting in, and then there's a new block size increase debate. It's like, do we now need to go to 8 megabytes? Potentially discussion. And then how long do we get to a scenario where we start struggling with things like Ethereum has, where we have latency issues?
I don't think we're getting a block size increase. I think what's going to happen is
you don't, but think about it like this. I'm just mapping a potential scenario. The people we had on the podcast 4 years ago, if we have them on now, some of those people, they don't get a lot of listens, a lot of downloads. The audience has changed.
Sure.
Imagine we bring in hundreds of thousands, millions of new users, degens who love JPEGs. Imagine the miners start loving it. Imagine everyone starts thinking, oh yeah. There's a big consensus starts, a social consensus. Yeah, let's increase the size of increase the size of the blockchain. And the old, less influential people who were always from the same set of principles, their voice gets edged out, and this newer group starts to be quite dominating. What if we do go to 18 and 16? What if we do start to make some of the mistakes of Ethereum because we've pushed so hard for this, and everything's changed so hard that we forgot the original principles? I'm just saying it's a potential scenario.
Understood.
And then we don't have nodes. We have people who are struggling to create nodes. We have Eric Wall doing Twitter threads on how he tried to create a node for Bitcoin, but he couldn't. We go to data centers. We centralize.
I think these are the necessary coalitions across Bitcoin that have to kind of remain vigilant. And I would say that the best way to price out all of the JPEGs is more base chain economic activity in Bitcoin for financial use cases, because they're much denser. Your fees go much further. I can send you $1 million for 25 cents, or I can spend several $100s for a JPEG. Right?
It's going to take time to get there, though.
Take time to get to where?
Like more dense economic transactions.
More people using Bitcoin. Yeah.
You can't force them.
But no, you can't force it. And this is back to Bitcoin not having any rules, right? I think that at this high level, we're just starting to kind of draw the lines of what this future space could look like. And for me, I think there's even if you have a bunch of people coming in and they're printing JPEGs and they want more of them, it gets prohibitively expensive as the fees increase. So as more people start trying to put JPEGs on the blockchain, the fees go up, and it gets harder and harder and harder to justify spending $500, $1,000, $10,000. As the Bitcoin price goes up and as the more demand is in there, you're going to price out a lot of the JPEGs, and you're going to have to be a lot more deliberate if you're going to do this stuff. And to your point earlier, it's more than just JPEGs. People are actually writing code and putting it in the blockchain as well. Someone made an Ordinal inscription, that's the JPEG stuff, which we will get to. They specifically wrote code that allows you to view inscriptions within the inscription. So they're writing code now that can actually interact with the other inscriptions. And I think you're going to start having people understanding and playing around. Like, what is it actually to use this tech for? Not just pictures. I think pictures are just the easiest thing because it's what everyone already knows from the rest of crypto. But there's a really interesting opportunity now that this exists. What are other use cases? And I also want to just call it a really important point for one of Casey's big motivations for starting this project was people were buying JPEGs on Ethereum and users were being duped.
They were buying the hash.
They were buying a hash to a pointer sitting to an S3 server
Yeah.
or something like Arweave, which is its own token that has design flaws because once the token falls below the price of cost of storage, people just turn off their Arweave nodes and then the nodes disappear. It's like BitTorrent, right?
This
Or
is a
IPFS.
real NFT.
So this is a real NFT. So for Casey's perspective, an inscription, which is this actual embedding of data on the blockchain, has to be endogenous to Bitcoin. The data has to sit there because people are now saying, oh, what if I wrap my own token and I use the ordinal stuff and I point it off to this other chain over here? It's not an inscription, right? You're trying to make pointers and references that don't exist on Bitcoin, and that's out of bounds. Casey doesn't want to support that. Most people don't want to support that. If it has to be endogenous to Bitcoin, so I can download a node and have it. And this is an interesting use
But
case.
can you stop somebody doing it?
Well, you never can stop someone from doing it. It's just kind of going to be, this is all social consent. Just like ordinals are all just a shared hallucination, these rules of like what are the rules are all shared. But also people are talking about now uploading like 3D gun files into a block. You can get that under 4 megabytes. You can actually have it so anyone in the world can have access to a 3D gun print.
Is that a potential self-own that we're asking for trouble?
Well, here's the other thing too, from a Bitcoin history lesson, people have been able to embed arbitrary data into Bitcoin since it began.
Yeah,
And
but we're making it's a little bit more overt now.
Well, I mean, you're making maybe the barrier to threshold to enter easier, but ultimately this stuff always existed. People were using stuff in op returns. People were putting stuff in bare multisig. So they would make a multisig transaction on chain, but the keys were garbage. They were just using it to pump a bunch of data in there, right?
Has anyone put any child porn in this yet?
So not on the ordinal stuff that I'm aware of. I've heard stories that years ago, like 2013, 14 or something, someone may have done that. I didn't personally go to verify that and look for it.
Yeah.
So like why?
You don't want to do that.
Right.
But like, is that again a potential risk?
I mean, in the sense it's a risk that it's now on a node, and this is what everyone's been saying, that because it's on a node, then it becomes illegal to run a node because it has child porn on it. So This is where I would say that it's not like the literal JPEG is sitting there. So can I use this as an opportunity to talk about envelopes and inscriptions? So the way this actually works technically is you do a taproot transaction. And with this taproot transaction, you use Bitcoin's programming language called Bitcoin script, and you actually you do your send, and then you add extra data with something op false, mean not true, op if. And op if says, if the previous statement is true, run this code. But since it's op false, op if, your node skips over it entirely. It doesn't try to validate it because it's garbage data. And then you push a bunch of binary data onto the chain. So it's not like you literally have the image sitting there. It's in a very obscure format that isn't directly accessible. It's not like I can go to my Bitcoin folder and like see the images that exist.
So how do you see the images?
You would have to run extra software to actually parse through all of this binary zeros and ones to make it look like an
Isn't
image.
that just what computers do? They pass information to display a JPEG.
Yeah, I mean, computers parse information, but my point being is that if you just run a Bitcoin node and you're just using it for financial transactions, that just looks like zeros and ones and you're never actually interfacing or interacting with it.
If I had this on my home computer, isn't it the same until I plug a monitor in? Like if my hard drive was found with child porn on, not saying I have child porn by the way, but if my hard drive said I had child porn in it, but I've had no monitor plugged in, isn't that exactly the same?
I don't think, because like the file exists somewhere on your computer.
I'm saying all the file is a bunch of ones and zeros itself. It's a computer that interprets it on a monitor.
But you instruct the computer to interpret that
by switching it on and opening it up. But the ones and zeros still exist.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that is going to get fleshed out a bit more. I think
I'm just thinking.
My point being, though, that this already was available on Bitcoin, and I understand your point that it's more accessible.
Yeah,
I understand that. But
what about
this is not a new threat vector. This is already something that was there.
Yeah, but now it's more real. What if we have New York Times, Bitcoin blockchain, the new home for pedophiles?
You mean the journalists are going to keep being like disingenuous with their narratives? Well, this is just part of, we're Bitcoin is a movement to change the world's money, like in a very real sense.
Yes.
Right. It is.
It's a movement to change the world's money, not to change the world's art and JPEGs.
Yeah, it is. But my point being, it's an open pool and I'm not the lifeguard setting the rules. So if people are going to use it for those use cases, I can't stop them from using it because Bitcoin is an anarchic system. I can't touch it.
No, I understand. I just feel sad about it.
I think it's something that we have to accept and kind of understand what the future state is because the cat's out of the box, like the cat's out of the bag. We can't change this.
What if it wasn't a JPEG? It was like a WikiLeaks file that's then immutable.
What's your point?
Like there's like stupid use cases and maybe more interesting use cases.
No, my point being is, are we now creating a place for self-own, a place for people to attack the network, to spam it with stuff, to put stuff that's not particularly like guns are illegal in the UK. Now it's a place where you can download, 3D printed gun things. I'm just saying there's lots of, there you go.
I mean, this was from a long time ago.
Yeah.
But this is my point, though. But like, also, I disagree with the word spam. If you pay the transaction fee, you're participating in the rules of the network. So be it. It's not spam.
Satoshi Dice played by the rules, but it was considered spam. And
people considered it spam. They were valid transactions, though.
Of course, I get that, but we can post-rationalize anything by saying that. But at the same time, if we're trying to create the best money for the world, if we're trying to create apolitical money that makes the world a better place, I'm just not 100% sure this is a net positive without a net negative. It feels like it's just swinging to the net negative for me, but I'm not anti it yet. Yeah,
I think it's net negative when you view it in the lens of the money narrative.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
And Bitcoin is it's like a hydra, a many-headed dragon of many things.
Because money.
Bitcoin's information that we use as money.
I mean, I consider it when the work I do is to communicate and educate people on why Bitcoin is the best money.
But this is what I mean by it being a narrative change, because this is a necessary narrative change in how everyone's going to think and talk about Bitcoin.
Why is it necessary narrative change? It's just I think it's actually
necessary is the wrong word, because it just I think this is the kind of like the impasse we have, is that I'm making an observation of how it exists and you're looking at it through a lens of it's an is-ought problem. I'm saying this is, and you're saying it ought to be.
No, I think what I'm saying is Bitcoin moves slowly, very slowly, right? And this feels like almost like an accidental byproduct of Taproot that wasn't foreseen, and now we have it.
Yep.
And I think it's potentially unfortunate. And I worry about the attack vectors that come from this, that attack the network, attack Bitcoiners, attack its use case of money, and potentially take it down a road that maybe leads to more centralization. And ultimately, it might get to a point where Bitcoin fails as a project.
Well, let's take a step back for a second. We know the North Korean government has gotten Bitcoin and hacked it and used it for stuff. If we're going to apply a moral lens to this,
it's not so much a moral lens. A
narrative lens, like a narrative supremacy.
Let me tell you why I reject that. It's not a moral lens. It is a goal to create the best money in the world.
But then I go back and say, okay, so North Korea gets to use it to kind of perpetuate their dictatorship. Is that okay?
I'd rather not know.
What do you mean? Well, but not knowing doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist.
But that's a byproduct of money. So if it's money for enemies, but it's still money. And, anything is a weapon. Anything can be a tool or weapon depending on how you point it, right?
Exactly.
You cannot create the best money without that money being access to other people. But if it's JPEGs and other weird shit that stops it being as good money, that is a concern of mine. And if it's something where we could see the entire shifted, like the narrative change, which means the old guard is out and new guard is in, and that new guard may be a little bit more Roger Ver in style and eventually lead to blockchain bloat, centralization, because nodes can't afford to run multi-terabyte nodes, and we end up going down that. It's a concern.
So hardware costs trend down over time, and that's why when I was a kid, I had like a 8 gigabyte hard drive, and now I have a 2 terabyte hard drive in my backpack. Right, the cost in Moore's law, that stuff continues to scale. I think we also need to understand that Bitcoin finding this use case of like a decentralized hard drive that anyone can use. I got that from Junseth. It could be used for good too. You could have, there's now Tank Man images on the blockchain forever. People could coordinate dissident campaigns and oppressive governments using this as a decentralized hard drive, knowing that the government can never fully delete it.
I'm not even arguing against that. Again, I don't mean to be a dick about this, but I'm going to try and stay laser focused. Is it a net positive or a net negative for creating the best money in the world? That's my entire, everything comes down to that. do we risk making this less good money by having it as a JPEG system?
I think this fixes the Bitcoin security budget problem for the long term.
Bitcoin
No.
It doesn't have a security budget problem.
It doesn't today.
Yeah, but but we don't know. Like every single, like that was a fear every halving. We don't know the price of Bitcoin in 4 years, and 4 years later,
But this de-risks it.
Yeah, but this could always have been done at a later date. I'm saying
I agree with that.
Yeah, I'm saying Bitcoin does not have a security budget problem
Today.
Today, it won't tomorrow. It's not going to forward. We don't know when.
We don't know.
And so what we're doing is we're trying to potentially fix a problem we don't know exists, that might never exist, with something that might damage it.
I think there was a genuine concern because of all of the unknown unknowns that 20 years from now, we may not have had, if you've barely people using Bitcoin, you don't actually have enough miner subsidy to protect the network anymore. A robust Bitcoin fee market was always necessarily going to have to happen for the health of the network. And what used to be the narrative was that we would get additional user adoption over time to bring more people on board to be able to protect that. Now we have a buyer of last resort of Bitcoin block space that will always be keeping that fee pressure up, which will increase the value of using Lightning, because if you can open up a Lightning channel, you can amortize the cost of your Bitcoin transaction over years and years and years of that channel. You do one transaction fee to open it, and then you're using Lightning for the rest of the time.
Fees are going up, aren't they? Every cycle, the amount collected in fees, both in Bitcoin terms and dollar terms. We did that with Samwuta, didn't we?
I mean, I think it depends on when in the cycle you pick. Maybe on average, though.
Yeah, on average, yeah. So we don't have a security budget issue at the moment
yet. But halving is like, if you want to keep it at parity, every halving you have to double the Bitcoin price to be at place. And like, I don't think that's a very precarious place for this to continue working. The price has to double.
So we have to, for the next halving, we have to trend somewhere between base of 50, so 30 and 140.
Okay.
That's perfectly achievable.
But what if it doesn't?
And what about in 40 years' time?
Right.
Yeah, but
then another 4 years' time.
You're saying what if it doesn't? It's the same me saying what if a new guard of Bitcoiners campaign and get us to 8 megabyte blocks, and we just have less nodes.
But to the point of the price doubling every 4 years, it can't double every 4 years forever.
No, but it doesn't have to double every 4 years forever. It has to. The fee mark has to keep increasing to a point where it's uneconomical to attack the network. It's been uneconomical to attack the network for a long time. Okay, so that's all it has to do. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to double every time. We might need like 3 more doublings, and we're good. But I find it a real hard justification for something that may be decades down the line, that we need something now that adds risk to this being the best form of money. That's what I struggle with. And so I always come back to my just very simple question. Is this a net negative or a net positive for creating the best money ever?
I think you should talk to like the pruning that might be available.
Yeah. So this is, the pruning point's good in that the witness data today, and this is talking about what makes it best money. Is best money part of it everyone being able to independently verify the entire supply of everything? Because today, if you use the Bitcoin default specs, you download it and you start running it, runs a flag called assume valid. So every 6 months, there's actually kind of like a stamp saying this is the, at this height, this was like the Bitcoin hash, right? It kind of gives you, make sure you're on the right path. You actually don't verify all of the signatures if you're running the default software right now. And with all of the inscription stuff, since it's sitting in the witness, it's something that's pretty trivial to prune out, where you can maintain your economic nodes for the things you care about. And if you're in the developing world and you don't have a big tar drive, you don't need a full archival node of every single Bitcoin transaction ever. Maybe what's good enough for you is you can validate the state and the validity of your transactions that you're holding and you're receiving. Right? This is an idea of being able to just focus on, instead of being the decentralized database for everyone to get a full sync from you, you just are looking out for, this is what I need to personally verify the quality of my money that I'm spending and the quality of the money I'm receiving. And pruning is a really great way to make it much more economical. So it's not just a 0 to 1. It's not a binary of, do you have a Bitcoin node or not? There's a whole spectrum in the middle. Yeah. And I think the fact that stuff is all sitting in the witness and can get discarded anyway, after a certain block height, you can just kind of throw this stuff away and make a security assumption saying 300,000 blocks have gone by. I'm pretty sure if someone was trying to pull something funny, a single node in the entire network would be able to call it out and end the whole like fraud. So it's a very good security trade-off, is because you only need one honest actor to have the actual honest blockchain to be able to say, oh, that's an illegitimate transaction. That person doesn't actually have that money. And you as an individual, because you're going back to the use case in the developing world, you can just have your small node that validates everything that you need directly for yourself.
So do you think ordinals and inscriptions make Bitcoin better money?
I think that's a really big question. I would say that people that are speculating and holding on to rare ordinals and inscriptions, all this stuff, reduces the available supply out for trading, which makes it better money because people are having higher demand for it. I think on the other side, to your point about the runnability, usability of a node, it makes it harder to be decentralized because it increases the software requirements. I think I am still putting my thoughts around this. Like I actually started playing around with ordinals because you asked me to come on the show to talk about them. So I went and downloaded an ordinal node and started playing around with it.
That was Danny.
Was it Danny? There you go. Yeah. So Danny asked me to do that. So I started playing around with it. And then I just happened to be in Bitcoin Park last week. And I got to meet Casey and was coding with him. And very funny, just I think also not just as the money, but also within the crypto communities, people have started actually moving their assets from Ethereum to Bitcoin.
Jason Williams, I saw that.
Yeah.
By the way, I fucking love that. Can I tell you the story behind that? Absolutely love that. Let me just say one more thing. I like the fact you're wrestling with this because I am really wrestling with it because I see the fun and the cool side of it, and I see and I also see the using the blocks. I can see every single use case for that. But when we try and create the best money the world has ever seen, and it's decentralized, the very first pillar, and if this pillar breaks, this is like your central column, is that it has to be state resistant.
Yep.
And anything that potentially centralizes us and damages state resistance concerns me the most. And I don't know enough, but my suspicion is this could be a centralizing force which damages that pillar. And that's what worries me.
I think we have to remain vigilant and have primacy over that. And I think everyone who appreciates Bitcoin for its different perspectives also wants to preserve that. I even think the JPEG people want to preserve that. They want to make sure that they can have access to all of this stuff in the far distant future, because otherwise it has no value today if it's going to get captured tomorrow, right? One, and two, just from a cultural observation, this is something that in this current conversation is important, but I view this lens in politics, culture, life in the larger sense. The side that's having more fun is going to win. Like memes.
Do not buy that at all.
Well, hold on. Just hear me out for a second here. Specifically, having an enforcement structure adds friction and cost to interactions. Whereas if someone's having fun, they're going to be self-motivated to keep on doing what they want to do. And if you're talking about like meme warfare, like whoever's like being silly, fun, and irreverent, they get to have fun. And whereas the other side is trying to police and control that behavior, that's a cost to try and police and control behavior. And because of that, the side that's having fun just has a natural momentum about it. Whereas there's an inertia trying to kind of control stuff.
I think you'll change your mind on that point of the future. I think you've shot from the hip there, and I don't mean to
I've been thinking about that for a while.
But I don't buy that in the slightest. I think the crypto degens have been having way more fun for us for years. I watched the Solano boys, and I've been to Art Basel. These people are having a lot of fun. They've had more fun than us for years. We've won because we created the best money. That we have won, by the way. It's not which wins. We already won.
Well, I agree with that.
And we won because we created the best money.
But I think
fun had nothing to do with it.
But no, Bitcoin culture is fun, though. I push
fun.
back on that. We have our own fun.
Yeah, but
because
we don't have as much fun.
Where do you think the whole have fun staying poor thing came from? We're having fun because the number's going up, and we're all having fun in Bitcoin land because we get to laugh at all of them and all their clownish acts. We're having fun taking the responsible path, but the culture is having fun with it. I understand and respect your point about it can feel sterile at times.
But this bit of fun is immeasurable and subjective.
Well, I mean, so let's talk about some fun here, because I was at Bitcoin Park. I was talking with Casey. He said the first person that sends a Bored Ape Yacht Club or a CryptoPunk over to the Bitcoin chain as an inscription will be a winner and like a legend forever. And Jason Williams said, "Help me." And Jason was like, "I want to burn my monkey. I have a monkey. I have a gun to his head. I have a gun to my monkey's head, and I want to execute him."
So
then I pulled Casey aside. I was like, hey, I have someone who wants to burn a monkey. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, what do we do? What's the next step? He's like, we write the code.
I can't
So
believe
he
you didn't
grabs
call
me.
me and we burned my rare pep.
We can do that next.
Oh, no, that was already on Bitcoin.
It's on Counterparty. Yeah. So Casey grabs me by the shoulder. We walk over to a corner and we start talking about what this is. Casey comes up with the term teleburn, a teleport burn, right? So we start designing like, okay, how could you do this? And without getting too technical, you take your inscription ID, you make an inscription ordinal on Bitcoin, you get a unique ID, you hash it and you shrink it so it fits as an Ethereum address, and you just one-way send it. And that's what, Casey tested it by burning his rotomore.eth. He took rotomore.eth and just shipped it off to his Genesis inscription. He's only made one inscription. It's the first inscription. It's kind of this cool Day of the Dead like skull. So he did that as a test, and then we went over and we burned Jason Williams' $500,000 Bored Ape Yacht Club.
I mean,
And now he's like, his perspective is that it has transcended all of the controversy of the racism and anti-Semitism that project's been seeing, and it's now transcended to the bright orange, future.
Dude, this is, I do love this stuff.
Yeah.
And anything like this, which completely destroys the use case of Ethereum, I love. Ethereum's last cycle was NFTs. That's really what it was. And they're going to have to come up with some new bullshit next time. What was it? IFOs?
Yeah.
Initial farm offerings. They're constantly going to come up with new shit. And we beat them on money, and now we beat them on JPEGs. I love the fact that we constantly beat them.
Yeah.
Honestly, I fucking love it. But the butt remains. The dick butt remains.
The dick butt remains. So the dick butt is really funny too because
50 Bitcoin.
well, Ryan didn't actually sell it though, did he?
No, Hoddle told me he got offered it for 1 Bitcoin, didn't buy it. It's now listed for 50.
Yep. Yeah, so Rindell's great. So Rindell's one of the guys from Clubhouse, and I was busy working, and doing everything I was doing at my company, and I heard all this stuff that was going on about Ordinals, and Rindell was like talking about, oh, hey, here's a video. I put a dick butt as the second inscription after Casey, and he put it on a Sats card. If you've seen the Sats cards from CoinKite.
Yep.
Yeah. So
there's a Rail Bedford Sats card.
There are Real Bedford Sats cards. Well, I actually want to one-up that. I wanted to give you a present and get this on before the end of the show. I have a Sats card here for you.
Have you inscribed the Rail Bedford logo?
Absolutely.
You motherfucker.
Here you go.
So,
You're out of order. Love it now. Fuck it.
There you go.
Oh, man.
There you go.
And I own that.
It's on the card.
So I can sell that.
Yeah.
I wonder how much
I was at Bitcoin Park, and I was like a DJ taking requests, making inscriptions for everyone.
Well played.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Now you have a Real Bedford. And I gave you,
Like
2 years
I'm
ago,
gonna
I
know what
gave
to
you
do
the
with
rare Pepes on the open dime. And now you have a inscription on a Sats card with the Real Bedford logo.
Every time I see you, I get a present.
Yeah.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
You've done that.
Yep.
Say I inscribe one.
Sure.
Which is the one?
It's whatever value you want to assign to it. I would assume from a provenance perspective, one coming from you would be, it's all a shared hallucination, right? It's subjective value. We've left the world of objective Bitcoin transactions to this aesthetic taste, which I think is one of the most exciting things in this Ordinal project, that you're now on the Bitcoin playground. You're at my house now. So one, you have to use Bitcoin transaction to make this whole thing work. 2, I think what we're seeing initially with all of these like kind of copy paste JPEGs over from the Ethereum projects is just the first move, because it's just the easiest thing to do. I think it's a way to have Bitcoin culture and aesthetics as part of the art. And I think that's just very early days in understanding what that's ultimately going to mean and look like. And so yours would probably be worth a good amount because, relative to some sort of collector, I'm not a collector. I've actually have made a bunch of inscriptions for people making requests for me to make them for them because they knew I could do it. I haven't made one for myself yet.
Yeah, I mean, I still have zero interest in
I think
NFTs.
this one, though, inscription
cool.
number 6, what is it? If you scroll up a little bit there.
6 bazillion.
69,971. That is the one that was on the What Bitcoin Did show. So that has provenance. That's yours. I gave it to you at this time and place. It has some sort of relative timestamp. If you make one, it'll be inscription number 110,000 or something.
So there's 2.
Point.
There's like which came first, but also who did it.
Yeah.
So like if I ignored yours and did one, someone's more likely to buy mine.
Sure. But I'm also not even selling. I just gave it to you, right? Yeah. Like you have it now on that Sats
You
card.
could have sold it to me.
Why would I?
Because that'd give me like 6 Bitcoin for it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But this is...
No, and I could see, look, do you know what? I could put every player in our team on there and I could sell them and that would raise money for the team. Like I see these things. I still don't understand why people buy them beyond thinking they can flip them.
I'm personally not an art collector. I couldn't tell you. Like my wife's
I
here,
am.
she can tell you that I'm not collecting art. I'm not buying art. I don't have the visual aesthetic lens for all of that stuff. I'm much more on the technical side. It really, I guess, value is in the eye of the beholder and understanding, right? Like maybe Jason's monkey that he teleburned from Ethereum to Bitcoin. Maybe, as a first, like that means something, right? Maybe, the first inscription, like Casey's inscription, worth a lot because it was the original one. The dick butt is the second inscription ever made. It was the first person that made one that wasn't Casey, like you just said before, like, being listed out for 50 Bitcoin. And like, these are all, I think it's very entirely possible. There's like a immediate craze because of all of the NFT JPEG people coming over and plowing their capital and trying to play around in these markets. And this very well could fizzle out. It could. Do
you think there's any link between the price run up recently and this, or do you think it's completely independent? Is there any reason to say?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because we had a run up yesterday.
I think the global markets are too complicated to assign it to this stuff specifically. Possible, sure. If you had some whale that was like, I'm now more bullish on Bitcoin because of this use case, sure. But like, a market is made up of millions and millions of participants in Bitcoin that are buying and selling. It's hard to say like this is the reason why.
How are the ETH people responding to this?
I think they like the opportunity, but then when people do stuff like the teleburn, they view it as an attack on the Ethereum network because they're destroying the asset on the ETH side and they're moving it over to the Bitcoin side.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm asking about. Are they seeing this as more of a threat? Are they seeing, because there's more value to holding it on Bitcoin than is on Ethereum.
Well, I think it's pretty objective in that, the data permanence of this is not up for debate. Yeah. Whereas, Arweave goes down, IPFS goes down. It's not really, you have much more resiliency of it. And I think a lot of the attention to value is because now this is on Bitcoin and people in Bitcoin find this interesting, which is a much larger capital base than Ethereum, right? Yeah. It's like, double the size. Maybe not all of the actors that are using Bitcoin for this stuff care about this stuff, but I think Bitcoin has legitimacy in anyone who's involved in cryptocurrency as the gold standard. It is the best blockchain that exists. And the fact that this now exists here has a lot of people trying to chase and trying to understand and play in that space.
What do you think, Danny?
I'm firmly on the couldn't really give a shit either way. And the point really for me is that what are you going to do about it anyway? So
that's my take.
Well, so then I would want to speak to somebody who knows something can be done. Said, though, this is what you could do.
Well, what you could do is you could do a fork.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, it's like, what are the steps for that? How do you build consensus? Is there like
there is no rule book. This is the thing about Bitcoin, and like why even something like Taproot, which everyone cryptographically believed like this is a good thing to do. There was a whole meta debate on how do you even activate it because there is no set attack path. Like there's no because people view it as an attack. The idea if you're changing Bitcoin. American HODL's had this metaphor. Have you ever seen Independence Day when the mothership opens up its door?
Yeah.
The mothership opens up its door, and that's when it's vulnerable. When you're changing the rules of Bitcoin, that's when it's most vulnerable on this technical consensus layer. So there is no set like, oh, well, you get 10,000 signatures and then you do a BIP. And then like, there is no rules.
Who was that Romanian Bitcoiner who drowned?
Oh, I can't remember his name. He was a bit of a lunatic.
Yeah.
Murray Pevskew?
Yeah. Didn't he still run like version 1 of the software and he hated something every like version since?
Yeah.
Well, who was it telling me about? You were telling me about Luke Dash's version of Bitcoin Core.
Oh, Bitcoin Knots?
Yeah, do you know about this?
Yeah, yeah.
But this is basically the same thing. He's taken every conservative option throughout, but he's still running the Bitcoin protocol.
Yeah, so Bitcoin Knots censors Satoshi Dice transactions.
Interesting.
Right, so people could run these implementations. Here's the problem, though. You could maybe on the peer-to-peer, like I have a new transaction I want to send, and you want to censor that. But if it's in a block, you have to accept it. Otherwise, you break consensus. So you can try and have soft social pressures, but if it gets into a block, it's gonna you have to accept it or you have to fork off.
Who are the anti people? Is it? I'm gonna guess. It's going to be Pierre Rochard, Adam Back, Francis Poulier, Luke Dasher. Not sure on Odell. I've not seen him talk about it, but I can imagine he
did Citadel Dispatch and he was kind of poking around. I think initially everyone had the healthy reaction of what the heck is going on here? And this could is this an attack on Bitcoin? I think I've seen Pierre and I've seen others say like we're now in an evaluation phase because it's they're not looking to fork right now.
Yeah.
but they're collecting data. Like Pierre does really great like infographics and charts talking about here's how much transaction fees and the mempool is related to ordinal stuff versus normal transactions. Because you don't want to hastily make another change and then find out that you made an even bigger problem.
Yeah, I think the wait and see is actually a good point.
It is the way to do it.
Have you seen Dylan Leclerc put out a really good tweet?
Let me pull it up.
Yeah, when he was talking about block space usage. And
Yeah. I've been also running my own analytics of just looking at the mempool, the unconfirmed transactions, and seeing out of the low fee ones, like over half of them are these ordinal inscriptions.
So we should admit, like people who are pro this should admit they were never really anti-NFT. They were just anti-Ethereum.
Yeah, this is platform maximalism versus monetary maximalism.
Yeah,
Like if you believe Bitcoin is the best platform, everyone should be on Bitcoin, but they're all part of the Bitcoin camp. They all run the Bitcoin code and they're all consensus with each other.
It's hard to disagree. These are very interesting charts from Dylan.
Taproot usage now is like what, 15% when it was maybe
When it was
1%. Yeah, it was under 1%, a month ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that was that funny Eric Wall tweet. His 2023 predictions was Taproot adoption would like double to like 2%. He was being glib, and now it's 15% a month later.
Suck it up, Eric. But Eric would like this. I know Eric.
Well, yeah, no, Eric's having, it's part of that irreverent fun. And I think you have to openly acknowledge a lot of this too is just trolling a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Udo do it.
Yeah.
With his Bitcoin wizards.
The Taproot wizards.
Taproot wizards. Kind of funny. Yeah, no, that's the other thing. It is kind of funny. It's fun.
That's your...
And then going back to thing, like a standing army destroys itself. Let's have some fun. We've got nothing to fight over. Let's have some fun. Let's enjoy it. I am, like I say, if you've got anti here, pro here, and you got the middle line, and just on the anti, but not so much want to do anything about it, I want to observe. I think my concern's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm. I think Bitcoin is resilient in its handling this new influx of new transaction types and use cases, and the network hasn't broken. So first off, the software right now is still functioning. This hasn't broken Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think the responsible thing to do is collect data, give it a year, see because if this is a flash in the pan, then there's a whole hullabaloo changing code over nothing. So give it some time to see the permanence of this. If this actually isn't a fad, if it's actually going to be an enduring element of Bitcoin, you then can have time to walk through and think about what are the right things to do to change that.
Yeah.
I personally think it's going to be a block size decrease because the last thing you want to do is say, oh, we're going to censor ordinal transactions. Because what you're going to do then, it's a cat and mouse game. You're just going to change what it looks like and you're still going to be able to get it anyway. Yeah. And this is, Casey put a lot of thought into making this as minimally invasive as possible. Like it doesn't bloat the UTXO set, which is something that's more of a tight constraint than block space because the UTXO set, all of the unspent transactions that exist in Bitcoin have to sit in local memory. So you can't, if I said, like, because what people used to do in 2012 or even earlier, they used to do just random public keys and just like garbage, like transactions to represent data. And then that pollutes that permanently. So for someone who did that stuff back in 2012, that can never leave local memory, which is much more scarce than like hard drive space.
Fair.
Yeah. So like I think it's a wait and see approach to understand, is this a flash in the pan? If it continues to grow in adoption, I think at least for the next 6 months to a year, this is going to be ripping for a while. I think a lot of people are entering and playing around with this stuff, but we should be really careful before we make a consensus change. And if it comes down to a consensus change of decreasing the block size, I'm here for it. I want smaller blocks. Like Rodolfo talks about this, where if you can get to 300 kilobyte blocks, you could do all of your block relay over AM radio. If you could do it all over AM radio, you don't have to worry about if the internet goes down. You can start broadcasting blocks to everyone, and it makes it much more resilient. Like that's the ultimate side I want to be on, is as this decentralized technology being able to survive and be resilient. That's my top priority. I then also live in a world of this exists and I can't change it, and I'm not going to fork off my coins to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't fork off. I come down to what will be, but I think it's worth debating.
Sure. I think this is starting an interesting conversation. The mempool may never empty again. It's possible it will. At the moment, it just becomes so cheap to send these, like at 1 sat per VByte, you can just send such large amounts of data that someone now is going to use it for a use case always. Like someone's going to find a way, whether it's putting photos of their dog, if it's going to be, you've seen the OpReturn bot on Twitter. So there's a bot. So OpReturn, just very quickly, you can actually put arbitrary text into a Bitcoin transaction. It doesn't actually.
Oh yeah. So this is where like they know there's a certain block and they celebrate and they put a BI.
Yeah, they're like, or it's my wedding day, right? Like they'll do a little message, right? This is just the higher scale version of that. Right. Instead of using 40 characters or 80 characters, you're now using full images or scripts or text. Like people have put games onto Bitcoin, like Zork. which was one from like the 1980s. It was like a text RPG, like go north, pick up sword.
Yeah.
It's now like it's there. It's one of the inscriptions is just the JavaScript code running Zork.
I think they did Doom as well.
Yeah, Doom. Yeah,
Hold
Doom.
on. I'm
yeah.
old enough that they were the games I played when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They literally were.
Man, you are old.
I am old. My first computer was a BBC.
Like the British Broadcasting Channel?
I don't know if it's the same company, but it was a BBC. And my first game I ever played was called Manic Miner.
Manic Miner.
Yeah, bring up Manic Miner screenshots. Yeah, this little character. You had to
Was it
go-
American Huddle has a bounty? He wants to get lemmings as an inscription. Yeah, like this is people are going to find use cases to throw this stuff on there now. So we have to wait and see. Ultimately, I think Bitcoin is strong enough to survive this. It's just going to be a bit of a social question how you get coordination on making any sort of change to route around this.
There you
Look
go.
at that
Was
computer.
this really your first computer?
My first computer. I remember my dad coming home from work one day with it. He used to have floppy disks or cassettes. The cassettes were a fuck. You'd put the cassette in and it would take about 10, 15 minutes to load the game and could fail. And it would go, search for Manic Miner.
I'm pretty sure this has come up on the show before.
It's the first game I ever played. I remember it. I only think I ever got to about, like these games are so hard. I only think I got to about level 8.
That looks like Lemmings.
I still go and play on the, you get the emulators. I still go and play this game on an emulator. Still trying to complete this game.
Wow.
40 years later.
Still not done it.
Still not done it. Do you want to show?
Well, really quick plug, Hell Money podcast. That's Casey and Aaron's podcast. They've been doing a lot. They've been talking about the Ordinal stuff for a while. Want to push them out there.
Yeah, please
too.
do.
Yeah.
And do you want to show your company?
Yeah. So very quickly, the company I founded last year, coming up on a year now. Yeah. AnchorWatch, which is a nautical term referring to the crew of sailors who watch the ship at night while it's at anchor. And we're building an insurance company for actual Bitcoin. We are using some really interesting technology with our wallet, Trident wallet, using Bitcoin mini script to allow us to have more advanced Bitcoin scripting scenarios to have multi-institutional custody. So you can do really interesting things like key hierarchy. So in a legacy 2 of 3 multi-sig, we have the 3 of us here. Let's say you're a customer. Your concern, if you hold a key, I hold a key, Danny holds a key, is that we can go run off with your money. But we can actually set this up on chain, no fork required, so that your key must sign plus one of the 2 of us, right? Additionally, you can add things like and or statements. So you can add different tiers of a vault security where you can do things with time locks where, let's say, a very straightforward example everyone has thought of before around this stuff is a decaying multi-sig. So you can have a 5 of 5. And then if the money hasn't moved in 6 months, it becomes a 4 of 5. And then in 9 months, it becomes a 3 of 5 and a 2 of 5, right? So you can add resiliency to the ability for you to secure your Bitcoin and have much more flexibility.
You could have like vesting like that as well.
Yeah, you could do escrow. You could do like employee distribution of like bonuses and stuff. Yeah, you can add. Our core thesis is that we're going to be enabling a lot of this Bitcoin smart contracting language that exists today, have those hard rules as code, and blend that with off-chain governance and compliance for insurance use cases. Because today, insurance in general, you leave all of your money at one custodian, and it's a very legacy banking model of thinking about how you'd want to secure your money. Why wouldn't you want to have a distribution of multiple parties that can distribute that risk? And as you distribute the risk, you can actually bring insurance to Bitcoin. And today, the insurance markets are very undercapitalized, underdeveloped, where you may have a large custodian and they are not they're not insured for the amount of money you have there, right? So maybe you're getting 5 cents on the dollar or something if there's a mass loss event. Because if that one custodian has a loss, everyone has a loss. You could have some sort of segmentation in tranches, but just very likely in the correlation likelihood you're going to have a loss, there's going to be many, many, many losses. So we're tackling a hard problem, I think, for just core Bitcoin financial infrastructure.
Well, if you come to London, maybe we'll talk about that a bit more.
We'll be swinging by Lloyd's soon enough, and I'll maybe catch out a Real Bedford game.
We would love that, man. All right, Rob. Great to see you, man.
Pleasure having me on.
Sorry to be so argumentative. I didn't mean to be a dick, but
It's all right.
it's the first time I got into it.
Well, listen, this is a tough conversation, and I think we're just starting to understand and kind of explore what the debate space is now. I wasn't trying to bring this as a debate. I was trying to bring more just forward of this is how the technology works, but I can understand where you're coming from and trying to explore the deeper ideas beyond how the tech works.
Well, it's the first time I've really spent any time thinking about it. So I was like figuring out in my head as you were explaining it, because I've just avoided it for a while.
Yeah.
But here's what it is. Thank you for coming on, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks.